right, we are back. Hey, everybody. I am excited to be here with Fil Kearney. I should say I am Ryan Doyle. This is the Verdigris table. We're going to roll up a character on the Game Master's Compendium of Explosive Creation. But as you could tell, I jumped the gun there. I'm pretty excited to be talking to Fil. Fil, what's up? Where can people find you on the internet and what are you doing there?
Hey, I'm Fil Kearney, Filkearney. If you type that into Google, it'll give you my Patreon, my YouTube page, and my artwork and the stuff that I've been publishing on the DMs Guild for the past number of years. The pitch is I create games, I illustrate them, and then I publish them. So I run streams 10 times per week, either doing character art, book cover art, interior art, cartography, token generation, or I'm doing page layouts for books that I create, play tests, publish, and then support with additional stuff. Like when I make a book, I'll have a flagship book, and then I'll build 5 or 6 different expansions out of it, which are all, for the most part, for the past 7 years, have just been variant rules for 5e D20 type games. Like the first set of books I came out with was a color mana system for Magic the Gathering enthusiasts to use the 5 colors and a mana point system to replace the 8 schools of magic and spell slots that are traditionally associated with Dungeons and Dragons. Interesting side note there, real quick, is that WotC's um, philosophies in gaming since like third edition when they first picked up the IP and they started working Dungeons and Dragons. They treated D&D like a deck building game, which makes sense because they're Magic the Gathering. That
That's
you'd have 20 levels worth of character, and you can multi-class, take kits, which are like prestige classes, as well as like templates and like monster equivalent levels to just like mash together a character that would have unique mechanics and action loops to execute how you want your character to contribute in succeeding in an adventure, much like how Magic the Gathering would build a deck with different creatures, instant effects, enchantments, sorceries, and counter spells to be able to execute a game plan to be able to beat your opponents. That's how Wizards approach playing D&D. Create a character that can defeat the dungeons or the challenges that the DM creates for you, and it exploded. It just absolutely exploded. And then fourth edition like really gamified it, and then fifth edition really reeled back
mm,
on those mechanics, and that they like went back to the old school. So their philosophy then, originally their philosophy was, let's make a whole new mechanical system that can be added on to all the other mechanical and resource systems that we built in 3E. There's like 15 of them, and over 15 levels you can cobble together all of them to be able to do really crazy stuff. But in fifth edition, they're like, that's way too much work. So instead they would take a concept, and instead of building out new mechanics to make that concept unique, they would take that concept narratively, and then they would distill it down into what mechanics are already inside of the player's handbook that we already know the rules to, that we can keep a grasp on and still be able to present the flavor. Like Spelljammer is notorious for not having ship combat mechanics. Instead, let's take the idea of spaceships and make it work with what's already inside the player's handbook by retheming it. And Magic the Gathering was no different. Let's take all this richness from the Magic the Gathering universe and boil it down so it works inside of our 8 school spell slot system, so we don't have to modify your characters to play. But most of us MTG enthusiasts like, color magic, awesome, where is it?
mm,
So
mm.
when it didn't show up, it's like, well, let's put on the tinkering hat and let's build a color mana system. And that's basically how I approach game building in general. I love 5e, I love D20, always have. And in third edition, they were putting out 2 books a month, so there was no reason to homebrew, because I'm still trying to wrap my heads around like Magic of Incarnum or like Shadow Magic or Vestiges. Like I like all 3 of those books came out like in 9 months, and there's like 30 new characters I can build just from that set, plus whatever else they came out last month. Like they were really just punching out content, so there was never a need for me to build stuff. But once I got into 5e, I'm like, all that mechanical richness is gone.
Mm.
So now that I've had this 25 some odd years of exploring role-playing games, it gets really, I mean, you've been around for a long time too. You know how you can like connect different pieces together. It's like I can pull stuff from Cipher System, and I can pull some stuff from GURPS, and I can pull some ideas from Palladium and cobble those together, reformat it into a 5e game engine, and be able to approach a game from a completely different direction than how, like, say, Wizards presents 5e. And just to capstone that, I put a punctuation on all of that. Everyone keeps talking about what's going to be the next D&D killer. The way I like to say it is, we don't need a D&D killer. We just need people to make D&D killer by adding things that are missing from the game to make it fun, to make it move as fast as you want it to, or have the depth of characters that you want, like you've designed. There's so many ways that you can approach the D20 system that it's not like any one company is doing it wrong. Just have more people messing around with the tools so that we can take what we want from all these different systems to really just build the game the way that we want to, like they say you should in the first page of the DMG. So anyway, that's kind of my legacy. That's where I go. That's the way I think when I build things. What kind of a game do I want you to experience? What mechanics do I need in that game for you to have that experience? And how can we make that all work inside of the framework of the 5e game that most people are already familiar with? And those are the books I make. And then I illustrate them, and I do it all online. So there you go.
Love that. I mean, that right there demonstrates like the depth of understanding and knowledge, but also like thought and care that goes into all of the stuff that you're touching.
Yeah.
Like you did a historical overview of a lot of D&D right there without shitting on a single part of it, which you
Yeah.
never hear.
I love all of it. I love the only problem I have with WotC is that they are overmanaged. It's
Yeah, I
just
mean, my problems with
Hasbro
WotC
just
are
takes care
actually
of it
problems
too
with
much.
Hasbro, and I think it's a very important distinction to make that there's a
Yeah,
difference between the corporate structure that's trying to squeeze every dollar out of the golden goose, and the people on the not on the ground, but the people who are trying to make a fun game, right? And
yeah,
you can just everyone has different kind of stylistic preferences about what's going to be fun, or you have a different group of players. So what was fun 6 months ago at this table is going to be, not as well received with this new group
absolutely.
of people. Um, but yeah, I mean, and it's about to kick off again. We're changing editions, kind of. Maybe everyone's gonna
I'm excited.
plant their flags and die on a hill and go to their respective bunkers. And the other night, you and I were playing Beckney. We're playing the Red Box. Well, we were playing the extension of
Yes.
the Red Box.
Yeah,
And that's great. I love it. And tonight I'm
absolutely.
gonna run some 5e, and tomorrow I'm gonna run some old school essentials. Like, and all of those games, the way I do them, have cross-pollinated.
Yeah,
It's not
absolutely.
one separate thing. You don't have to pick a lane. You take what works and you build what's missing. And that's you mentioned Spelljammer in all of that. I want to circle back to Magic the Gathering too, because I love that. And it's a great magic system to like not bring into Ravnica when they brought that out. Like, to not do more with that. So that the strength of this hobby is the recently threatened ability of people like you to come out and draw on inspiration from everywhere else and amend the game and like take it or leave it. I think they did the hobby a service by making 5e simpler and more
Yeah,
approachable than, say, a Magic the Gathering system.
yeah, because
Or
yeah, if you could bounce off of that, it's dense.
it's
It's
dense.
dense.
It's a lot to learn, and it's a very steep on ramp. It requires a lot of you to get into that hobby. I mean, financially, if we're gonna talk about Magic the Gathering, unless your buddy's like, here, play this deck. Um, the 5e doesn't feel simple to a lot of people onboarding, but it's way simpler than a lot of other ways you can go about this. Um, but yeah, man, your I hesitate to use the word fix, but your amendments, your additions, your book on Spelljammer. Tell us about that, because it's
Oh gosh, yeah.
great, and you're still
And
making content for it.
like I said, I make a book, and I build a book because there's so many ideas I have around a theme that I can't just like there's a thing called scope sprawl. I'm sure you're familiar with it, where you have an idea, you want to build a package out of it, but as you build that package, you're like, ooh, look at this, ooh, look at this, ooh, look at this, like a thousand little tangents that can run off in all directions.
Mm,
And to be able to build a tight product that has a focused theme, you have to let all that stuff go. But from my experience, those little ideas become like loss leaders. The in marketing, a loss leader is when you offer something below cost to lure people in to look at other things that are related to that. And so the DMs Guild is actually really great with that. Like just as a quick tangent, I was talking about the Magic the Gathering, the color mana system. So like
mm,
there's the core system to that. But then like for example, I built like a 13 page pay what you want, free if you don't want to pay for it, expansion for warlocks. Specifically, I called Spell Point Warlocks. It just takes pack magic and invocation magic and converts them into a spell point system that can then be converted into the color system that is in the color magic book that I created. So that became a pay what you want that then gets bundled with the main book. So like the main book is $15 and the spell point sorcerers pay what you want, but I mark it at $2. So between the two of them, that's $17. But if I bundle them together, I reduce the cost down to like 12.
mm,
So you get like a 30% discount if you pick them both up. And if you really need to, you could get the Warlock book for free and just pick up the core book for $12 by itself. So that Warlock book becomes a loss leader for me because it's all the same rules, but applied specifically to the Warlock. So it's not like I can gouge you for $5 for other rules that already exist.
mm-hmm,
So like when I make these expansions, I'll take pieces of rules that I already built and say, here's a chunk of rules. Here's how you can apply it to this specific situation to dive down this rabbit hole. And that's what I mean by scope sprawl. If you had it all inside of one book, it would be self-referential. So you'd be able to say, hey, here's a whole 13 pages about a warlock specifically inside of it. What am I going to do that for every class?
mm.
No, because that's going to make my book 250 pages long where I'm just trying to replace spell slots with spell points, you
Right.
know? So
And how
that gets huge.
and how big is that bundle though? There's a lot going on in
There's
that.
there's 6 books in the bundle,
Uh,
and a number of them are free. So like there's like if you were to buy everything, it'd be like $36. But you could cut off like if you got all the pay what you want, that removes $10 off of it.
mhm.
And then the things that are left over in the bundle get bought down like 30%. So like if you got everything, it'd be like $39 worth of stuff that if you cut out all the fat, you could get for $12.
And it's what because you're talking about something that would be $70 now
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
from
But
Modular.
it's such a like you said, it's such a niche audience. Like how many people are D&D and MTG enthusiasts to the point where they want to get rid of spell slots and schools and instead use a color mana system to I tap red through a fireball. Like there's not a lot of people out there in comparison to both markets. That's what you call couture design, where it's highly specialized. And because I can do my own art and my own layouts and my own design and my own playtesting, I can pull all this together into a single package that the art is directly referencing whatever's on the page. So it becomes a very, I like it to become an experience of like diving into the rules and the visuals in the book reinforce the rules and provide the narrative flavor that I'm going for that the rules are attempting to guide you into. So I'm really blessed to be able to create all that stuff together to be able to hand you a final product. Like I want you like for spell like you asked about Spelljammer, I'll finally get to that. The Spelljammer book that I built, its main drive is that people wanted ship combat rules, but people also wanted to have combat mechanics that they were familiar with. Ergo,
Mm,
what you should do, what I felt I should do, was create a system of ship combat that uses the action economy that your characters already have of action, bonus action, move, reaction, object interaction. There's 5 types of actions that characters, and then there's verbal commands, which don't require any actions technically, unless it says you do. Like commanding undead is a bonus action. You give them verbal commands as a bonus action. But like your hireling or your sidekick, you can just say, "Hey, go beat that thing up," and that doesn't take any action economy to go tell your friend to go club a giant. It's like you divide that stuff up. So when I built ship mechanics, um, the roles that your character play is only it's not like I'm a bosun or I'm the captain or I'm the cook. It's how am I choosing to spend my action economy this round? And I could spend it piloting the ship with an object interaction to steer, or I could use my attack actions to you as a pilot attack with melee weapons like the claws and the legs and the rams that are built into these spell jamming ships as melee attacks. However many attacks I get per round, my pilot, like I want a barbarian as my pilot because I can rage. I get 2 attacks, and with this upcoming thing, I could sacrifice my attacks to get bonus dice to make my rams deal more damage like with the 2024 mechanics. Um, but I could also instead use an attack action to command that ballista team to fire a siege weapon at a ship that's 2,000 feet away. Maybe that's my attack action, but now maybe there's some guys on my deck. So while I'm telling that guy to fire the ballista, I run over and I cleave somebody with an axe, and like that's my action economy is steering the ship close enough to then order my siege team to fire the weapon with an attack action. I get out of the chair, run over with my axe and cleave a dude, and then walk my way back to the chair, sit back down, and use a bonus action to recommand control of the ship. And now, since I'm raging, I can extend my barbarian rage to protect my ship while I'm engaging in combat. So all the combat, your characters can just divide up their action economy how they normally would, but we provide tools and devices and equipment and crews of a ship crew to be able to expand the the scale in which you're basically conducting battles. So the combat grids that we use are 5-foot scale for characters, 50-foot scale for fighter ships. Like TIE fighters are 35 feet wide, if you didn't know, and an X-wing is 45 feet long from Star Wars. Both of those fit inside of a 50-foot square. So a single 50-foot square on a grid is the same as though you were a pixie riding on a boar. That's a medium-sized creature. It still fits inside of a 5-foot scale. You are a squad of pixies with arrows, and somebody's got their hands on the fur guiding the boar around. The boar's like pummeling through goblins like with its tusks. And on your way by, all your pixies are like firing arrows on your way by. So your whole team is acting together to be able to just wreak havoc on this squad of goblins. Now, if you think about it as Spelljammer, your boar is now like a scorpion ship that's 75 feet long. You and like 8 crew members are firing ballistas and catapults and using claws and their legs to stab at stuff as you're like kicking through this crowd of fighter ships that are basically goblins. So you're just shredding those either at the 50-foot scale for fighter craft or 500-foot scale for like hammer ships that are 250 feet long. So all these mechanics use the exact literal mechanics of 5e. The only difference is calculating damage has a different formula. That's a in the DMG you were talking about like variant rules and DMGs in one of your episodes. And Essence 20 by Renegade Games. It did like Transformers, GI Joe, Power Rangers, and My Little Pony. All those Hasbro IPs. It's the Renegade's Essence 20 system, and what they do is instead of having the proficiency bonus, they use the proficiency die. So it's at each tier, it's a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12. So as your character gains proficiency bonus, instead of having a static bonus plus stat, you're using the proficiency die instead of your proficiency bonus to represent how chaotic it is to coordinate a team of 3 to 8 guys that are loading and firing a weapon under your command. You don't directly control the action economy. You're using your action economy to tell them to use their standard action and their bonus action and their object interaction to load, aim, and fire that weapon at the same rate of speed in a 6-second round of combat. And that die roll, if each weapon has a reload score. Like a ballista is a 3, a catapult is a 5, a trebuchet is a 7. And if when you make that die roll, you roll your d20 plus your stat plus your skill die. If the skill die result equals the rank of the weapon, it automatically reloads as part of your action economy. The characters were the crew was so good at loading their weapons that they automatically reload it and get ready to fire again. But if you so a first level character only rolls a d4, while a 17th level character rolls a d12. It's going to be super easy for that high level character to command a crew to reload a ballista with reload score of 3 But if you're only rolling a D4, there's like a 50% chance that you can't. And if you can't, then that weapon's basically done until you spend more action economy specifically commanding them and helping them reload the weapon. So if you roll high, you're rewarded by being able to fire the weapon again immediately if you have extra attacks. So as you gain levels, you get more attacks, your die roll becomes higher. It's more guaranteed that you'll be able to. And that lets you fire multiple weapons at the same time because you just stack the reload die. If I want to fire 3 ballistas at the same time, the reload score would become 9. And I'm not going to be able to do that unless I'm 13th or a higher level. But I'm doing triple damage as though I were a fighter with multiple attacks. I could fire each ballista individually and pretty much guaranteed to reload them, or I could fire them all together in one shot and have maybe like a 1 in 5 chance of automatically being able to reload all of those weapons and fire again. So that's sorry, deep dive into attacks, but that's like the only difference between 5e combat that you know in the player's handbook and what I presented is the sense of scale and that reload die making a difference of how many attacks you can actually make. And then your other team, like if you have a cleric and he casts a spell, he's got a bonus action, a reaction, an object interaction, you can have him team up with the fighter. So the fighter's issuing the commands to fire on the crew, and then the cleric helps using his spare action economy to help you reload the weapons faster so you can maybe squeeze out another shot this round. So like it allows the team to lend each other action economy so you can work as a group as a single initiative, or you could keep your individual initiatives and break up sequencing so you can attack things in time with stuff. So it's yeah, that's the mechanics I built basically. And like all there's like a dozen different little things that were absent from the Wizard of the Coast box set that were necessary, like travel time in the astral sea. That's really useful, right? So I just took the teleportation table that has degrees of familiarity. And the more familiar you are with a location, the faster you get there. So if you wanted to build trade routes, you want to find somebody that's ran that route multiple times, because instead of taking a month to find it, he can get there in 2 days. So you want to form alliances, and you can spend time researching locations with a sage so you can gain a level of familiarity with the location. So your first time out, it's faster than a month. It might only take 2 weeks. But as you run that route more and more, it gets faster and faster and faster. So you can build characters that are sojourn specialists that go out and find exotic locations specifically so they can market their ability to get there fast. Which is why the Mercane are so powerful. The space merchants, they have a hive mind. Everyone knows what everyone is always thinking. They all automatically gain intimate familiarity with any location any of them ever show up in. On my YouTube channel, Fil Kearney, I have a video about that. You can check that out, or anyone that's interested. Like all the mechanics I have is separate videos on my YouTube channel. So like that's like it's a 107-page book, 80 pages of mechanics. And then the last 25 pages is, want to learn how to use all this? Here's Light of Zaraxis, the adventure that was published with Wizards. And I convert the entire book into using the mechanics that I present. Like, this is how you can run Light of Zaraxis. And if you do, by the end of that adventure, you know how to build Spelljammer campaigns using the mechanics I present. So you can go out and you can build your own systems. You can build your own conflicts with your own fleets and navies and commanders and be able to present foes and challenges and exploration into different systems at any level from level 1 to 20. So, because I play tested this at level 16, and then I looped back around and I rebuilt Descent into Avernus as a Spelljammer campaign, specifically to use the Spelljammer mechanics, where El Terrell became a city that you had to defend. The characters would go out, find more allies, bring them back to El Terrell, incorporate them into their army. And they got to a point where they had siege weapons holding the line against the chains where the demons are trying to climb up. And then spoiler alerts. So Zariel's 500-foot ship becomes basically a 500-foot spelljamming ship. And so the team had spelljamming ships to fight her in those. And it's just, it was pretty freaking legendary. I'll show you the maps and stuff if you want afterwards.
Yeah,
but,
me too.
Yeah, it's hardcore stuff. So, but that's another example of taking the 5e mechanics and translating it into doing more than what's necessary for a dungeon crawl, but using all the same mechanics that you're already familiar with to just kind of expand the scope of gameplay. In this sense, it's literal. So there you go.
Yeah,
That's
awesome.
That's Spelljammer in a pinch.
I love it because it shows it's a holistic view to all of this. Because I mean I'm very impressed with what you did with the spell jamming mechanics and how it just meshes in with the core of 5e. It's not a separate mini game, which I find a lot of these solutions are like it speaks the same language, it's the same grammar and vernacular.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and maybe this is just me personally, but anyone who's listening to us right now, I'm probably in the same boat. Like I love the inside baseball. Like I like to see a creative mind at work. You said right out of the gate, like you stream always,
Yeah.
24/7
Yeah.
every
10,
day.
10 times, yeah, 10 times per week. In the morning before I go into work, I stream artwork just to get creative juices flowing, and also so I don't miss it all day. Like if
Mm,
I can't paint in the morning, all day at work I'll be pining. God, I wish I could paint. I hate being here.
that
If
is
I flip
such.
this When I flipped the script, it was like I appreciate being here because it allows me to paint every day.
Yes.
So it creates a state of gratitude and wanting to use that creative energy to excel at my job, which makes me valuable, which justifies me being able to spend so much spare time doing my hobby.
Yeah,
So
again, just like the perspective you bring to it all, right? Like it's not specific to artistic creation. It's also like it creeps into the life that you're participating in, you're describing. You're an artist,
yeah,
and an artist
yeah.
is making their life the art as much as anything else, and it's all one holistic thing. Are you familiar with The Artist's Way? It's kind of like passe now, but Julia Cameron? I don't know. There's a concept of like morning pages and like how you start your day
Oh,
if it's
huh.
creative, like one, you get all the crap out of your head, but two, it's also like establishing, like, okay, this is what's important. I'm getting it. I'm foundational, and I'm grateful that I get to do this in my life.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And
I
then I do
really.
design work at lunchtime sometimes, and then in the evenings and on Saturdays I do more design stuff depending on I'm always working on like 3 or 4 books at a time. And I'll spend a couple hours on one a week, and maybe I'll spend like 7 or 8 hours on another one a week, and then I'll have like my primary project, which I'll spend 20 hours a week on. And once the primary book gets done, it gets published, and it drops off my workbench, and whatever I was working on for 7 hours becomes what I work on for 20 hours. Whatever I was working on for 1 or 2 hours becomes what I work on for 7 hours. And that frees up the back end for me to start filtering in more projects to start working on them. So I've always got a conveyor belt of production stuff going on. So I'm always working through conceptualization, play testing is super important, and then working with an editor, and then doing the page layouts, and then doing all the artwork. Like once, like you'll see, like you'll see occasionally on my stream. Probably like in the next month we'll be seeing that for the Eberron project that I work on. That the all the maps will be done, all the text is done, the editing will be resolved. Now I just need to start doing page layouts. So I'll drop the page, all the art, and all the words onto the page, figure out a format, carve holes in the text for maps, and then whatever stray spots in the corners. I have like 70 tokens of monsters and NPCs that I already did on Artstream. If you check out my Spelljammer book in the appendix, it'll have all these tokens and ship tokens and maps and some stray illustrations. Like most of my visual assets that I can put inside an adventure are the maps that I did on stream already. I just put them on the page where you're talking about that room. And all the monsters that you're going to be fighting in this area, that becomes spot art that fills in gaps right along next to the stat block or information about what that creature is doing. Drop in the token so you know who we're talking about. So when you get the book and you peel open the download document, it's like, here's the tokens, like here's a zombie. Okay, well that's the zombie that was in. Okay, great. I know I put the zombie here. And like the mapping tools that I'm doing right now, I'm doing like a ground environment, trees and bushes, walls and buildings. There's some unusual plants and effect and like items that are in. It's in the Mabar, which is the manifest zone. That Mabar is the plane of undead and darkness in Eberron, and a manifest zone is when these two planes merge together, and so Mabar, the plane of undeath, is terraforming this forest, which means it's basically causing it all to die, kind of like a very Golgari black green sort of vibe, where it's killing all the natural life and it's replacing it with this Mabaran undead entities. Like anything that's dead automatically comes to life. The
You used the
soil
term
becomes like
necrotic
coffee
coffee
grit.
this morning, and I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yes.
The ground turns into this lively coffee grit and it's always raining because it's the rainy season. So like all these sinkholes are filling up with like this poisonous coffee brew that undead just drink up and rise up out of and attack your team. So, but all these little things like the flooded puddles, like those are little they're like little sticky tablet things that you can just drop onto a map. And I provide all those tools in the toolkit, and then all the maps that I actually put in the book use those toolkits to build a map. It's like, if you want your map to look exactly like this, I have it pre-built for you. But here's all the tools that I made it with that you can build your own environments with if you like these things. Now you have a toolkit as a DM to be able to just spontaneously, like in Roll20, I use Roll20, of course. So I can, because, DM's Guild with Roll20 equals crazy delicious. So I just use Roll20 as my virtual tabletop, and all the tokens and stuff that I build are pre-built to automatically just load and work into Roll20. So it's just part of the creation process. If I have to build all these things, why don't I build tools that you can then use for yourself? So
Yeah, and it's so smart and it's so inspiring. Like if you bounced off a Spelljammer because of the how poorly it was received and you didn't want to go translate all the second edition stuff, yeah, maybe go check out Phil's stuff to revisit new and improved version of Spelljammer. If you're not interested in Spelljammer, but you want to see how the sausage gets made, or you want to like tackle a project like this yourself, perhaps I would recommend at a lesser scale if you have
start
never done
small.
anything like this before. Make a one shot or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you're a one man shop, and as a one man shop, I can appreciate that. I sub out, I get art. Yeah. So speaking of inspiring, you're an artist first. And
Yeah.
like I do think that informs all of the decision making that you're doing, and just like the perspective, the way that you look at things. And insight to me, I was looking at what you're doing. I was like, fuck, I wish I could do that. Like that's the weak link in my game. I was like, I feel so lucky he's good at that. And Phil is colorblind.
Yeah. I see zero color. I have
Zero
gray vision
color.
only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Monochromatism,
A chromatomism.
chromatomism.
Yeah, a chromatomism is if
Okay.
you check out my channel, I have a link to it. There's a website that talks about it. I provide a link to it. But yeah, interesting. Another fun tangent. Professional artists that do see color often complain that their biggest difficulty is that the color tricks them into thinking that there's contrast when there isn't. Because like if you put a red and a blue next to each other, it'll be obvious to you that they're different. But if they have the same gray tone value, they look identical to me. So
Interesting.
when I build things, I think about the contrast in the piece first, and then have a light, like have almost like a an academic view, because I do. It's just math to me what the colors are. So I just look at the RGB sliders scale up in the corner, and like if I'm doing a forest, I'll pull up multiple images of forests and find the gray tone that I want. Like I need this trunk to stand out against the background, against the foliage. So I'll find colors in photographs that represent that degree of grayscale dichotomy, and then I just color by numbers. I know that this needs to be this green. I know that this needs to have green and red in it. I know this background is going to fade out into like a really low saturated blue green off mix because of the light that's filtering through. So once I can find those different color components, I can just add them in to basically, as I'm designing the piece as a grayscale piece, I'm just using those colors instead of a gray tone. So I literally have no idea what, I mean, like I have an idea because I can see the RGB, but I don't know what it looks like to you. I just know what it looks like to me, and I prioritize contrast. So most of my pieces have like a really wide separation between like foreground imagery and background stuff. There's a lot of contrast there to make things I want you to see pull forward and other things recede away. And the color won't trick me. I instead just use the gray value of it and just use a lot of references. I used to get fooled by like color filters and stuff like that,
Hmm.
but over time I've learned what the RGB slider scale is supposed to be for flesh, like Asian flesh versus Egyptian flesh versus Irish flesh. There are differences in the red and blue balances there. And once you learn what those are, when you look at something, if the numbers don't line up right, it's like I need a different reference because I don't understand why those numbers are like that. That means I'm going to have a bad image. Sometimes I get it wrong. It just works in the composition, and since it's fantasy, no one questions it. But that's
That's
just,
that's something
but
too. Yeah.
but that's just dumb luck, and that's not intentional. So I do everything I can to avoid that. Even if it looks cool, if it's not something I'm intending to do, it means I can't control it. And like when you put a blindfold on and you're firing arrows at apples on your friend's head, you really want to make sure you know where your arm needs to be to make sure you hit the shot.
And
So it's
that's
kind of the same problem for me.
I mean, okay, so coming from the outside, you know, like maybe it's idolizing it a little bit, but like it seems to me, I mean, we're going to get into a system in a couple of minutes where like I think limitation breeds creativity. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
100%.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people misunderstand that relationship. But like you took something that like on the face of it might have been like a detriment, right? And you have made it into a superpower. Like you have just built a whole approach around it, and you see things differently now and have developed a finer control over something
Yeah,
because of it. And it's just, yeah, it's cool to see and inspiring. Um, and you know, it's one thing to be like, oh, cool, you made this awesome art, like this art behind you, you made. Um, that's cool, but like I can tune into the stream and see you doing it, and especially as someone who has very little, you know, academic or otherwise, talent or practice in that area. um I don't know, man. You just you were like, oh, the hatching's wrong here, and you changed it, and the tree branch was coming out of the page, and now it's going into the page. It's like this one has to go
yeah.
into this one, so I'm going to move like 3 lines. I was like, damn, how do I like? I can't. I don't think in those terms. Maybe because I don't allow myself to. Um, and I think, yeah, no, you do. You had, I think it's a cutout from a stream, but you have a video up, talking about, or at least briefly, like going off on a tangent about Bob Ross, and
Yeah.
like that is my like, oh well, I'm sick, or like, oh, I'm bummed, I'm like, I'm emotionally sick. Like Bob Ross on repeat, on a loop, like that's the shit right there. And he has a pretty famous episode of like someone comes up to him, says, I can't see color, I will never paint. And Bob Ross, being Bob Ross, is being like, yeah, tune in tomorrow, and he paints this beautiful. I think it's like a night, like seascape image or whatever. But like he paints it.
It's another Alaskan mountain range.
Oh, of course it is.
I saw that episode live on PBS when I was 5 years old. I used to play Legos on Saturday morning, and would play Bob Ross. It was Bob Ross and then the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon on CBS.
Wow.
So I would wake up early enough to make sure I was awake for Dungeons and Dragons, and I would get bored, so I stumbled into Bob Ross, and I've literally been listening. I'm 50, so I've literally been listening to Bob Ross for 45 years, and I saw that episode, and it was so funny because I could hear in the conversation the guy wasn't asking how I. Bob did what he could. He said, well, you can't see color, we can do this in gray tone. What he was actually asking is, how can I mix colors,
Yes.
do it correct? And that's impossible. It's impossible. You can't do it with freehand oil paint, but you can with Photoshop, and I figured it out. It took me 30 years, but I
Interesting.
figured it out. And that was, for me, that was a massive circle for me to go back to understand as a when I was 5, what this full grown man was struggling with is like,
Mhm.
I can't connect with, and I'm playing with Legos, and I'm looking at an ocean of, like, I had like 10,000 pieces, like I had this massive drum of Legos, and there were every color, and it was so impossible for me to figure out, like, is this one green or blue? Is this the, and I just had to give up on it. It's like, fuck it.
Mhm.
Let's just go with the shapes. It's all that matters is the shapes. That's the only thing I can count on. I can build things with the shapes, and I'll just have to ignore the fact and get over it that it's going to be weirdly colored. And it's going to be mismatched. I can tell that. But then I became a freelance painter around year 2000, when the D20 eruption happened, and there was a
Mhm.
bunch of third-party companies, and then pay on demand, or print on demand became a thing, but it was so expensive to do that they could only afford black and white.
Mhm.
So there was an explosion of freelance work for artists that could work in pen and pencil. And it's like, I can do that. So that's how I got started in the freelance artwork, at the beginning of the 2000s, when there was no color art except for the cover. That's fine. You guys find someone to do the cover. I'll just do all your interior art. And I got a ton of books as a result of that, and got to explore a bunch of game systems because I was getting hired to do all sorts of random stuff. And that's what really helped broaden my horizon on gaming in general. But then once color, honestly, it was the globalization of high speed internet I
Hmm.
then had to compete with people in Indonesia, Brazil, and Serbia
The world is
that
flat.
had
Yeah, yeah,
that had a tenth or a fifth of the living expenses that I did, so I got priced out of the market.
yeah.
So then I got into just doing character art and scenes like super custom. I can't get anyone to do this, and I'm willing to spend stupid amounts of money to do it. I'm like, okay. But then it started getting weirder and weirder and more niche. And it's like, I don't think I want to stay in this. I don't like this rabbit hole that I'm falling down into. It's starting to get morally gray for me. Because
Yeah, we don't have to
yeah,
explore that, but I have a hint of what you're.
thank you. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was that. But at that point, I'm like, I'm dealing with people with Brazilian incomes charging the same amount for the artwork that I produce, but they're in color, and I can't do solo like couture work anymore. So I have to become my own. I have to become my own publisher if I'm going to ever pay myself what I feel I'm worth as an artist.
Hmm.
That's what got me into building games to create the books that need the art that I could create, and then I can do it all online, and I just get to paint and hang out and talk shop while I'm doodling, and it'll eventually become a book. So, but yeah, that's the other side of it. The freelance. I started in freelance artwork,
Hmm.
so by the time I got to making books, like artwork is, I can make anything. Literally, I can make anything. Just give me 40 hours or less, I'll build it. And then I just have to have pages to put the artwork in, and then just have fun. And it becomes zero time for me when I paint. Time disappears, and I just get lost in it. So
Yeah, and whatever, even if it's not something that like I'm gonna pick up and use one day, like just watching someone in flow, like watching someone do what they're good at, what they're into, because and they've been doing it for a long time. Like it's just entertainment isn't even in the word for it, but it's just like affirming in a
yeah.
way. Um,
Yeah, a lot of people just kind of look at like my stream slowly grows because it's a really niche audience that's interested in that stuff. But for the most part, it's people that like a study hall environment. It's
mm,
quiet commentary here. You can look up. There's some progress happening. Occasionally, I'll just dive into a topic of conversation that's interesting. I'll ramble on about it for a half hour while I'm building something, and so it just becomes real, just kind of flow of thought for an hour to 3 hours per day, however long I have. So it's a lot of fun.
yeah, great stuff. All right, we're going to take a tiny break and then we're going to rock out on some Game Master's Compendium of Explosive Creation. We're going
Nice.
to operate within some limits. I don't think a character portrait is is in the cards this afternoon, but we're going to build a character and do some world building,
Nice.
and yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Same.
All right, we'll be right back. Thanks, everybody.